Hi, I'm getting started on my sampler quilt, and I wanted to explain to you my thought process so that you could take it or leave it, how I'm approaching it, and start tackling yours. So for my first block, I went to block number one, which was Air Castle. Figured it was a good place to start. There's a lot of choices in the book, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And the chart here is going to tell you what you need to cut depending on what size finished block you wanted to have. So I decided the first block I'm going to do is going to be a 12-inch block, which is a nice kind of standard size for a sampler quilt. So looking at the diagram, they have 3 different fabrics shown, but she breaks it down a little bit more. There's actually 5 different fabrics listed, but some of them repeat. I ended up doing 4 fabrics, so I changed up her design just a little bit, and I selected 4 fabrics to make my block. So you can see here on the table I have it laid out, and I just want to explain to you some of the symbols that she uses in the diagram here. So you're going to be told to cut some shapes that are squares, and they might end up being weird measurements like 2 5/8, 2 3/8, all kinds of different numbers, not just the easy 2 1/2 and 4 inches. Some blocks she's going to have drawn like that with a line like that, and some are going to be drawn with 2 lines. So these are squares that are going to be cut in half once, and these are squares that are going to be cut in half 2 times. And the reason behind why this is done this way in order to get triangles is because of the bias. So any shape like this that's cut just once, that edge, which is biased, will not end up being on the outside edge of a block. If an outside edge needs to have a triangle, it's going to be done from a square that is quartered, because then you'll have a straight edge on the outside. So that's what you'll be seeing in the chart, and I'm going to show you how to cut those shapes. So I have a second block in the process here. Later on in the book, I jumped right ahead to number 26, which is Crossroads. And Crossroads, what I'm going to do is actually do it for the 6-inch block. So I'm going to do 4 blocks so that it adds up to be a 12-inch block when I'm done. So that one's going to be a little bit tinier. I find that when I'm feeling a little bit stressed, if I tackle something kind of small, it relaxes me because it takes my mind off of everything else that's going on. So that'll be a fun one to do. So for Crossroads, I needed to take a square that is 3 1/4 inches and do the quarter cut. So I'm going to show you with this square. I find that this is a time when having a rotary mat is very helpful, because I have to make 2 cuts and I really don't want to have to move the fabric if at all possible. When cutting, this is a good time to evaluate the tools that you're using. I prefer rulers with as thin of a line as possible, because if you have thick lines in your rulers, it does throw off your accuracy in cutting, because you could be in the middle of the line, you could be a little left or a little bit right of it, and it's going to change it. So I like the alpha rulers because they are nice and thin. I need to make 2 cuts, so I need to look at 2 things when I lay this ruler down on this square. I need to go corner to corner, and I'm also going to line up the 45-degree line on the edge of the fabric. So I can see the 45-degree line here, and I can see that I'm hitting corner to corner here. And I'm going to make a cut. And then instead of moving the fabric, I'm going to simply rotate it so that I can do the cut the other way. And if I didn't have this rotating mat, the other trick would be to stand at the corner of a table so I can kind of move my body around. So now I've got my rotary cutter has been cutting for masks fabrics all day, so I have a little nudge in it. So it's going to be time to change that blade. So now I have my 4 pieces cut to lay out for this block. So I'm going to head back over to the Crossroads layout, and these are the pieces that are the C pieces. So they are going to end up going here, 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 and here. And then the last piece is the A, which is these squares just cut once in half diagonally. So I'm going to pop back over. This time I'm actually going to do it flat on the mat because it's easier. Because I only need to do one cut on this one. So 45-degree line lines up. The other one will have to get done as well, but I'll just show you this for now. So these two will go here, and the remaining two, when I cut them, will go here, and that'll form that block. So things to think about once you get a block or two laid out and ready to sew is, and you go over to your sewing machine, you want to be working with a 1/4-inch foot. So the edge of the foot will give you the 1/4-inch seam. Preferably a straight stitch plate if you have one, especially if you have a sewing machine that is wider feed dogs, like a 9mm machine like the 590 that I'm working on right now. So if it's got a big opening here for the needle to go down, your fabric is just going to get sucked down in. Those of you with the 5mm machines like 530s, it's not so much of a problem, but you still might enjoy the more accurate sewing and the ease with a straight stitch plate. Another thing to be mindful of is on the stitch plate, there is a little notch right here, the very first notch, and that actually represents a 1/4-inch seam. When sewing, we actually aim for a scant 1/4-inch, so when you're sewing, you want to see that line while you're sewing, so the fabric will end up being right next to it, but not covering it. If you're covering it, you're going to be getting a generous 1/4-inch seam, and that's going to throw off your block measurements. The other thing I like to do is on the machine, when I'm piecing and I'm working in small things and small pieces that I'm only sewing for a couple inches and then cutting the threads, I like to put my stitch length down to 2.00. The reason for the tinier stitch length is that the stitching will not come undone when I'm aggressively pressing to get things nice and flat. And the other consideration is your type of thread. So I really like the Aurifil thread. It's a thinner thread, so less bulk in the seams when you go to press it flat. I'm going to pop back over to my block for a second. So I already sewed two of the components together just to give you an idea. When you sew, you should always first press exactly the way that you sewed it. So take it to the ironing board and then press it flat like that. Second is to press it open. Now you could leave it at this point if you're a person that likes to have all your seam allowances pressed open. That's great. If you're a person that does prefer to press them to one side, the third step will be you'll just press your seam allowances to one side. Like traditionally, I normally would go towards the darker side. The reason why I add that extra step in between of pressing it open flat, if you are going to press to one side, is it will be flatter than if you had gone from the first step of pressing directly to pressing it to one side. So always add that extra step of pressing it open, and then it's your choice whether you leave it like that or you take that additional step and press it to one side. Another thing to think about is when you put these two pieces together. Now we've got bias edges. So we want the ends to match. What I probably will take the time to do is, and it doesn't have to be a lot of fuss, I can just take the piece, fold it in half, and make a finger marking for the middle so that I have something to line up that seam to the middle, and then also obviously work out to the edges just to keep things lined up. When these two pieces are sewn together and pressed, they should measure the same as the center square, which is 4.5. So I will be checking that when I get to that point. In this block, this will be pretty straightforward. You'll be sewing together these in rows. When you have to put these little corner pieces on the ends, I would also recommend finding the midpoint and finding the midpoint of the square and lining them up so that when you do sew it on, you have these little triangles hanging over, but you're not guessing what that amount is. You're going to be lining up midpoints. So this is my first two blocks that I'm going to be starting to play with. As I think of more things to tell you, I will share them in another additional video. And in the meantime, if you have questions, if you want to send me pictures and get any opinions, you can make comments in the video here because then everybody else will see them. You can send me an email or you can call us when we're in the shop for a couple hours each day. All right, good luck. Have fun. This should be a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing everybody's blocks coming along. Thank you.